Hi, my name is John Budd. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota, and this is a joint research project with Ryan Lamare at the University of Illinois. The title of our project is The Ideological Distribution of Union Members, a Comparative Exploration. These are preliminary results, and we'd love any feedback you might have. Now, we know that most labor unions are left-leaning in terms of their political ideology, now to varying extents, and not exclusively. But what about union members? I don't think we know as much about the ideological distribution of union members as we do about labor unions as institutions. Now, probably think that union members are left-leaning in their ideology, again to varying degrees, but also it's not always the case. And so this really motivates our research question in terms of what do we know about the ideological distribution of union members. So to answer this, we look at countries from the World Value Survey, which are individual-based attitudinal surveys of around 1,000 people or so per country. A lot of different countries, a lot of different waves. We'll start with the United States in the most recent wave, which is around 2011. And we'll also compare it to some other countries, and we'll also compare it to the previous wave, which was about 5 years before that. And we're going to focus on two questions. The first question is whether the person is currently a member of a labor union or not. And the second is where does that individual place themselves on the ideological scale, left-right scale, where 1 represents left and 10 represents right, and each individual can place him or herself anywhere between 1 and 10. This type of scale, either from 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, very common in political science research and in public opinion polls. So let's first look at U.S. union members in the most recent wave of the World Value Survey, which again was 2011. This is the distribution of ideology among the 209 union members in that wave of the World Value Survey from the United States. And you can see that there's a very strong centrist pattern here. Notice there isn't one single center value between 1 and 10. It's 5 and 6 together, and that's where the bulk of the observations are. And in fact, the average is smack dab right in the middle of those two. But everybody isn't to the center, and also everybody else isn't to the left. Right? There's just as many people to the right among union members in the United States as there are to the left. This is an important result. Right? It's not that union members are uniformly left-leaning. In fact, they really represent a microcosm of broader ideological views. So this graph compares in the United States union members and non-union members in terms of the distribution of the ideology. Yes, there's some differences, right? But there's not a huge difference. Now let's look at a whole bunch of countries. These are all countries from the most recent wave of the World Value Survey, for which they asked whether or not individual or union members, and also asked them about their ideology. And you can see just by quickly scanning at the country abbreviations that there's African countries, Asian countries, Australia, New Zealand, and there's also different European countries, some Western European, some more Central European, so quite a nice diversity of countries from around the globe. And here we're looking at the low numbers in terms of the ideology score, 1, 2, 3, 4, so remember this is left-leaning. And some of these countries have a lot of people in that part of the distribution, Brazil, Rwanda, but notice it's not where the majority of union members are in terms of their ideology. So let's put this into motion and take a fly around this graph and get a better view at the different parts of the distribution. Again, here we're looking at more of the left-leaning part of the distribution, but you can see how much of the distribution is up there in the middle in terms of centrist. In many countries, it's really the dominant ideology. Now, as we spin around further, we're looking at the conservative or right-leaning part of the distribution. And again, there's significant numbers of union members in many countries who are out in this part of the distribution. So just like we saw with the United States, right, we shouldn't just assume that union members are primarily left-leaning. They're primarily centrist in many countries, or representing not only the center, but also the left as well as the right. Now, just quickly, let's do a couple more comparisons. So this is for the United States again. This only looks at union members. So the shaded bars in blue here are for the previous wave, so we can look at the extent to which the ideological distribution of union members has changed in the United States over a 5-year period. And you can see there's a slight change towards more polarization. The black outline bars are higher on both the left and the right extreme, and so there's a slight shift here towards a more polarized distribution. If we do the same thing, again looking at change in the ideological distribution within the unionized sector, within union members, if we compare Sweden, look at how much more diverse the ideological distribution is there. It's not as strongly centrist as it is in the United States. If we compare this to New Zealand, we can see a leftward shift. Right, notice the shaded boxes, which are the previous wave, are more towards the right, and just the black outline boxes more towards the left. And in Germany, we see the opposite pattern. The black outline boxes are becoming more frequent or higher to the right. And so in the more recent wave of the World Value Survey in Germany for union members, the ideology distribution is actually shifting to the right. And so notice this diverse pattern across different countries, right? Sweden as a contrast to the centrist United States, and New Zealand as an example of union members that seem to be shifting more left, and Germany the opposite of that. So in conclusion, we're looking at the distribution of ideological beliefs across union members, and we find that it seems like if there is a dominant ideology among union members, it's centrism. Right? We should reject any sort of beliefs that most union members are left-leaning. And in fact, in many countries, the United States included, right, there are significant numbers of union members who rate themselves on the right part of the ideology scale as much as the left part of the ideology scale. And as we saw with those country comparisons, right, there's not a uniformity of countries in terms of what's going on with shifts over time. So we can't identify specific labor unions in the World Value Survey. We only know whether individuals are union members or not. And so we're really capturing the ideological diversity of the labor movement as a whole, not individual unions. So the safest thing we can say is that the labor movement as a whole has diverse ideological views. And so I think this raises important questions about how to build solidarity. In fact, just yesterday, a number of unions in Minnesota came out very publicly calling for the leader of the Minneapolis Police Union to resign after his very distasteful comments in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And so you can see there as one very vivid example, very public example, very tragic example of difficulties of having solidarity in the labor movement, and some of that can be ascribed to different ideological views. Now again, we can't identify individual unions, so maybe there's less ideological variation within unions rather than across, and that's undoubtedly the case for some unions. Again, police unions come to mind as probably having more right-leaning members, but it's probably the case that there's a number of unions that would be reflective of the patterns that we see here in the aggregate and would have union members with a diversity of ideological views. And so this can present real challenges within unions, how to build solidarity, put pressure on how hard they can lobby or support political parties. For example, a Danish trade union official told Gumbrell and Hyman, you can't keep your members if you try to make them Social Democratic Party members against their will. We take this as, again, evidence consistent with diversity of ideological views, really putting pressure on how strongly unions can align itself align themselves with specific political parties or political goals. And also at the bargaining table, and also representation strategies. Maybe more conservative union members want to just have the union as their servicing agent, right? And they don't want to have more an aggressive social unionism or organizing model. And so have tensions perhaps between servicing and organizing approaches when we have a variety of ideological viewpoints represented within a single union. And so we think this is an overlooked issue. This is very early work, preliminary work on our part, but we think that it indicates that this is a fruitful area for more research that employment relations scholars should pay more attention to.